Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz Podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 385, and today's guest is Julia Austin, board member, executive coach, HBS senior lecturer, operator, angel investor, and now author. We have another repeat original guest. Julia was a guest for episode 30 of the VentureFizz Podcast back in 2018, where we do a deep dive into her background, plus cover lots of interesting topics like what it takes to become a great product manager and others. In this interview, we catch up to discuss her new role as an author and the details about her new book called After the Idea, What It Really Takes to Create and Scale a Startup. Julia is a seasoned operator who has served in leadership roles at several scaled technology companies like Akamai, VMware, and DigitalOcean. She has also advised hundreds of founders and startups. In this new book, which I believe will become a new staple in the entrepreneurial startup circles, she helps entrepreneurs navigate the complexities and challenges of building a startup, like important matters around product, people, operations, and more. What I also appreciate the most about this book is the fact that it is very comprehensive, yet easy to understand and implement. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like a quick run through Julia's background, so make sure you check out episode 30 for the deeper dive, how Julia became a member of the faculty at Harvard Business School and the impact of the startup operations course that she created, the inside look at what it's like to write a book, how proper discovery can help avoid false positives, why entrepreneurs don't always need a co-founder, the importance of ABR, that being always be recruiting for founders, the difference between founders and joiners, comparing the Boston and New York City startup ecosystems, and so much more. Okay, it's hard to believe that we have over 350 episodes of the VentureFizz Podcast. We have built up an amazing catalog of inspirational stories around building companies, and every episode includes lots of great advice to follow as well. If you haven't checked out our past interviews, go to venturefizz.com/podcast for the complete list. Oh, and one ask, please share the VentureFizz Podcast with your friends and colleagues in the industry. I appreciate all of your support. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Julia. Julia, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Keith. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited because we're going to talk. So you're one of my OG guests for the VentureFizz Podcast. I'm talking 6 years ago, episode 30.
Wow.
I am now, like today, I published 381.
That's insane.
So, it is insane.
Very proud to be an
Very
OG.
proud. So I think you are like Saturday Night Live has like the 5-time host type of club with like
do
Martin
I
Short.
get a blazer? Like they get a blazer.
I'm thinking of getting blazers from my repeat guest because you, Graham Brown at Lyra Hippo was recently on. I'm like, you're an OG too. So I'm starting to build this string of OGs, and yeah, the blazer or maybe something else I should have as a token of my appreciation and a recognition that you can wear when you're out and about in the startup industry. People will be like, oh my God, you're a VentureFizz 2-time guest. That's such an extraordinary thing.
Very on.
So anyways, I want to talk a little bit about your background, but if someone wants to hear the deep dive into Julia's background, you can go to episode 30 of the VentureFizz Podcast to find that there. But what brought us together today is to talk about this amazing accomplishment. It's a book.
It is.
And I want to talk about writing a book too, because after the idea, so one of my favorite things about this book was I felt like I could read it and just understand it and comprehend it. It wasn't like overly written where I was just like, I have no idea what I just read. It was like, I felt like it was written for me. Because it's just like,
joy.
yeah, because it was just like, I understood everything. And that you brought things down to a very simple level, from legal and finances and raising capital to obviously building, scaling, everything. So I feel like this is going to become the new startup go-to book. This is going to replace Hard Thing About Hard Things.
I hope so. Nothing against that book, but that was my
Lovely
goal.
book.
My goal in writing the book was break it all down to the simple things that I notice founders don't know is coming beyond the idea, as the title suggests, but make it very easy and useful. Those are the key words I want. It's easy to read, useful, practical. It makes sense. Thank you for just letting me know how to think about this or giving me frameworks to think about this.
I think you nailed it.
Thank you.
The other benefit that I like personally, this is going to be everyone that's reading this in startup land, is being a Boston person. I could I recognize a lot of the names that you
Sure.
reference, like Lauren Boyce. I'm like, oh my God, Lauren made the book. That's amazing. So, I mean, Eric Paley and so many others,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it was just a really, really cool. I always like to have that, be able to relate back to the people that you interviewed. So let's lay down a little bit of a foundation
Sure.
of you. So talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So the first part of my career was in IT consulting, tech, those types of things. And it wasn't until the mid 90s that I started getting interested in startup land and noticing the bubble was starting to really expand. And I wanted to be part of that. And I was always really interested in building. I'm a builder by nature. So even creating the book was like building for me. And happened to hear about Akamai Technologies right when it was coming out of MIT. And they were a business that was moving extremely fast. Back then, businesses could IPO very quickly. So they were getting ready for their IPO. They were a classic, bunch of academics and really brilliant people who needed more business people to come in and help them shape the business and sort of professionalize the business. And I ended up there, and that was the beginning of my journey into startup land. And from there, I was there as their very first release manager, became their VP of engineering, saw us grow, and then saw us sort of deflate a little bit during the bubble burst. It was a really tough time. We also experienced some tragedies during 9/11, other things that happened then, which I cover in the book. And then from there, I went to VMware, and I joined VMware. It was bigger than Akamai when I joined, but we were very much in that fast scaling. We had just been acquired by EMC, but we were still operating like a startup. They hired me to open their East Coast office in Cambridge, first office outside of Palo Alto, and help them become a bi-coastal organization. And then from there, I ended up running all of global engineering and a lot of other things that I did there. So it was a really amazing 8.5-year journey where there were a couple hundred people when I joined, which sounds big for a startup, but there were 15,000 people when I left and 3 different CEOs. But I got to work with the founding team very closely and really put a lot of core processes and cultural things into the company very early on, which was a lot of fun being there. And then from there, I started working at Harvard as a professor teaching a product course. At the same time, I became the CTO at DigitalOcean, which was another growing platform infrastructure startup in New York City, which is how I ended up starting to switch or split my time, I should say, between Boston and New York. So 3 incredible businesses, all went public, all had great growth, worked with really amazing human beings along the way, met a lot of great people and built a lot of great products.
Yeah, quite the track record. It's really extraordinary. I think you would, I don't know if 6 years ago, obviously you remember, but you had transitioned already out of DigitalOcean at that point, I think, and you were starting to do all these different things. So speaking of which, so what have you been up to since then? What have you been doing?
Yeah. So since DigitalOcean, oh my gosh, so much. So I teach a new course at Harvard Business School, which I'll talk a little bit more because it's what the book is really based out of. So I've been at Harvard since 2015. And in addition to that, I'm an angel investor. I sit on a bunch of startup boards. I have over the years. I also started a nonprofit. I started it actually in Boston and then really made it official and kept expanding it when I moved to New York, but it's called Good for Her. I started Good for Her for entrepreneurs who identify as women who wanted a safe space where they could talk all things startup. So not just a place to vent, but really to get support and help each other. And it's very small intentionally. It's a very intimate group. We have about 50 members. I only add 8 to 10 a year. And my goal for that group is to really build a connective tissue between them and then really let them keep going. But I'm always there for them. So I give them pro bono coaching and I give them access to experts when they need it. But mostly it's really just a space for them. We have a great group in Boston and in New York. And then we also have a number of members who are in other parts of the country and actually in Europe as well. So we really span a really broad demographic. Trying to think if there's anything else I'm missing. Oh, yes, of course. So I also am an executive coach. It's a big part of what I do now. So in addition to teaching and my nonprofit and boards, et cetera, I am an executive coach. I'm certified. So I did the work to do training. And I'd like to highlight that because I think there are a lot of people out there who call themselves coaches who may be great coaches, but they don't have the training and expertise that comes with programs that are designed to really allow us to be there for our clients without just advising them. So I think that's really important, advisor versus coach. And I coach exclusively startup founders. So I only work with CEOs, mostly CEOs and CTOs, because I have a technical product background. So I tend to gravitate towards those two roles inside of businesses. And I tend to work with them from post-seed, post-Series A through scale and exit. And I have several founders I work with who they're on their second startups, and I'm still working with them. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how does one become part of the faculty at Harvard Business School?
That's a great question. So how do we become part of faculty? It varies. When I joined HBS, it was through very lucky circumstances. My good friend Michael Skok was an executive in residence. You know Michael, he's another OG in Boston. He was an executive in residence for the Rock Center for Entrepreneurship at HBS, and knew that I loved being part of the academic community. When I was at VMware, one of the things I did was I ran the academic collaboration program there. So I had a lot of experience and reps working with students and faculty. So he was supposed to be a guest lecturer for a course, for a session, and the product course, and couldn't make it, knew it's something I loved to do. So he asked me to be his substitute. And through that, I met the fabulous Tom Eisenman, who had created that course, along with many other great courses at HBS. And after we met for me doing that, he suggested maybe I should be an EIR, like Michael was. And so I did that. And I'm one of those people who likes to get engaged and involved more than the thing that they asked me to do and be helpful. So I offered to do more with his students, and that led to then him saying, hey, we need someone to take over this course. Do you want to do it? So it was a very a lot of people ask me, is that your dream to do that? I was like, no, it wasn't on my bingo card necessarily that I would become on the faculty at Harvard. I mean, that's insane. I mean, there's a lot of me that's like, how did that happen? But it was a really good fit, and it was a very practical, applied course, experiential learning course, which is right up my alley. It's how I love to teach. So that's where it started. And other people come in through other avenues, but often it's you're a domain expert. You're somebody who can really offer something unique in the classroom, but also has the ability to be with students and work with students and really guide them through their journey in graduate school. So that's where it started. And then from there, we evolved, right? I ran that course or taught that course for close to 5 years. Then COVID happened. It took some time to do my coaching training. So it took 9 months to do that, which is like going to grad school again. And then had this idea for this new course that I teach now.
All right. So perfect segue. So startup operations, which was the foundational course for what led to this great book.
Right.
So how do you start to create course? Like I would be so intimidated to create a course for Harvard Business School students.
Yeah. Well, I had the advantage of having been teaching them for 5 years. I had a good sense of who they were, how they learn, what gaps that I saw they were experiencing, mostly from the alumni. So I really keep close connections with my students after they graduate. And the nice thing about grad students is they're out in the professional world. We tend to stay connected with them as they continue to pursue whatever they're doing. And for most of my students are founders. So there was a lot of conversations that continued after school. And a lot of them were saying, my education at HBS was fantastic, but there are a lot of really practical things I just didn't know I was going to have to do as a founder. The legal, the finance, the brass tacks of go-to-market, all the people stuff, right? I have a former student who's a CEO of a post-Series B company who said to me, I wish someone had warned me about all this people stuff. I just didn't realize how much of my business was just going to be all the people stuff. Yeah. Which is a large part of the conversations I have in my coaching sessions with founders is around people stuff, whether it's hiring stuff, whether it's working with investors, there's tricky customers, there's all these things that are very human. The human element is a big part of it. So I was feeling like we need to really offer these students a chance to really build these skills while they're still in school by applying the educational material to their actual startups. So one of the other things that was happening at HBS at the time was Tom Eisenman again had started Startup Boot Camp, which then I also assumed from him and ran for 2 years, which is a winter program that we offer to our aspiring entrepreneurs in their first year at school. And so what was happening is with Startup Boot Camp in the January term of the first year, they were starting to get more traction early in their startup ideas. And then we have another wonderful program in the summer for students between their first and second year called Rock Summer Fellows, where those students who are really serious about pursuing their startups can spend more time in the summer working on them and getting, basically, instead of being paid as an intern, they get paid to be founders, which is phenomenal. So what was happening was they were coming in their second year with real companies. So these were no longer just hypotheticals and maybe I'll do this, maybe I won't after HBS, but they were actually having like real traction. And they were saying like, I need to know how to do this stuff now. I need to know how to hire people. I need to know how to start figuring out my financial model, all these other things that were happening. So it's just feeling this like we're serving these students really well, but we're not giving them this real practical expertise that they needed so that when they left school, they really felt prepared. Even if some of them didn't go forward, I've had a number of students who decided at the end of the second year they just weren't ready yet, or they weren't in love enough with the product or the business idea to keep going, but have come back since and said, because of your course, I felt more ready to do this now, even if it's 2 or 3 years out. The other thing that I've had is alumni say, I wish I could take your class now, because it didn't exist when I was at HBS. And had it, I think I would have been more prepared or maybe not made some of the mistakes that I made.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how it would be so powerful and influential just to help navigate that journey. Like, I probably want to talk about this later, but I don't see many of the startup books get into the hiring practices like you did, which is so important. And it's just weird that it's not discussed as often. So, okay, so how did you get to the point where like, okay, now I'm going to write a book about this?
Yeah. So as most things happen in my life, things just kind of appear and then I have to decide what I'm going to do with it versus me setting out to do it. It's just I've been lucky. It's been very organic. I was finding that over time when there were particular topics that I kept hearing people ask me all the time, can you tell me how to hire better, run a great one-on-one, or deal with a tricky investor, or whatever it was. If I was hearing things a lot, I would say, I'm going to write a blog post about this. Not because I wanted to push people away and say, don't ask me, but I just found like a lot of people keep asking this and maybe I should write it up and then it will be helpful to people who don't go to HBS. Not everybody gets to go to Harvard Business School, right? Very few people get to go. But I wanted it to be practical and easy to consume as a blog post. And so what ended up happening is I had an agent, kind of funny, my agent Sylvia randomly reached out to me and said, hey, I've been following your blog. It's super useful. Why don't you have a book? And I said, I hadn't thought about it. I know I can imagine it might be useful, but it really wasn't something I was thinking about doing. I do come from a family of authors as well. So there was a little bit of this, oh my gosh, am I going to be an author? Like, I don't know about that. I love to write, but I hadn't really thought about it. And so she was wonderful support. I'll help you do it. I'll help you pull a proposal together and just see how it feels. And if it feels like something you want to do, then we'll pitch it and we'll see if we can sell the book. So that was 2 summers ago. And we wrote the proposal together. And I couldn't get over how easy it was for the content to flow. And it wasn't just regurgitating the stuff in the blog post. It was current, fresh material where I felt like, wow, yeah, this would be like really useful for people who can't come to my class, right? And who can't be in my course. And it's the things I talk about all the time. And a lot of my blog posts, I'll get inbound from people I don't even know who'll say, hey, I just read your article on co-founders. It was so helpful for me. Or I have another one that's very popular about the CTO VP engineering split and like when do you start to fork and have 2 different rules. There's a lot of that are very like timeless. So it felt very natural and comfortable to start writing it. So we kept going and we wrote a whole book, or I wrote a whole book. I actually did all the writing. There was no AI involved.
Well, all right. So I have a question about AI soon too.
Okay,
So I like, all
Fine.
right. So Basic Venture is the publisher.
Under Hachette, yeah. So they're an imprint under Hachette. So Hachette's the publisher, and then Basic Venture is one of their arms.
So Basic Venture is like their business book division.
Yes, exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what was the process like of, so you talked about like, it just kind of came to you, but there's the editing process,
Oh my
there's
God, yeah.
publishing dates and.
Yeah, so I'm a lifelong learner. My kids are all Montessori kids, and that's a big part of Montessori is lifelong learning. And I feel like I should have been a Montessori as a kid. But so learning how this all works, I can tell you, I can speak somewhat like an expert today, but I didn't have a clue when I got started. I had no idea what I had signed up for. So there's a whole process that I wish in some ways founders had, where your agent really does the pitching for you and they really position it and they tell you the proposal that will sell, all those kinds of things, which, at the end of the day, founders really need to pitch their own companies. I really believe that. You shouldn't farm that out. But it was certainly helpful to have somebody who knew how to frame it. Once it gets sold, which is what the publishers will buy your book, then they give you about 9 months to write it. I was very motivated to write it before classes started again because I wanted to not have to be writing and teaching at the same time. But they give you about 9 months-ish to write it. That for me was literally sitting in the same chair day after day. And it takes me about an hour and a half to get warm up, really, where I stop looking at my phone and I'm starting to get much more, I'm in it, I'm in the zone. And I could go hours, like 5-6 hours, and not even realize that I hadn't gotten up from my chair to do anything, like not to take a bathroom break, not to eat, nothing. All of a sudden it's 5 hours and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just been writing nonstop, which was great, but also not, because you get a cap in the number of words that you can type. So I was about 80,000 words over my limit, which is a lot. So, as they told me, the publisher said, it's better to have too much and cut than not enough, right? So, but that was great, because what they do, the publisher will really help you focus on what are the things. A lot of what I wrote was sort of general business stuff, and they're like, what are the things that are very startup specific? Like, what are the things where you can say, this is specifically how you think about this in a small company versus any company. So even though some of it is fairly, has a lot of utility at scale, it really is centered. So that's the writing process. And a lot of the machine of marketing and all those other things really don't happen until you turn in your manuscript. So you turn in the manuscript. There's 2 rounds of deep editing where they do edits. They send it back to you. You respond to those. Then they send you another version. The first round of edits, you have the opportunity to make big structural changes, like that chapter doesn't make sense there, or this section really belongs in this other chapter, not here. You can make some sort of significant changes. The second one is purely, you can't change any, the layout's done at that point. Like, if you change that, it's going to push these words to the next page, and that's not okay. So come up with another way to solve this. Like, so it's very challenging in the second round to not only to make the changes that don't script the layout, but also this world is changing so much in startup land, and some things are timeless, but there's other things where, like, a new hot story comes out where I'm like, oh, I really want that in the book, because that would be. And some of them I got, like the Paul Graham post that came out about founder mode versus manager mode. Had the good fortune of coming out at the right time where I could factor sort of that, my point of view on that topic in the book, but just accepting I'm not going to get it all in there. It's just being okay with it and keeping it, to your point earlier, of easy to digest and read without trying to cram everything in there.
Yeah, because AI, when you started writing, was a thing. It's been a thing for a long time, but it was starting to really build momentum 2 years ago. And then now it's just like, can't leave a conversation without talking about it. So, so topics like that are definitely things that you don't want to miss, where people be like, this is already outdated. Okay, so let's get into some of the topics. I wish we could go through every topic, but we don't want to discuss your whole book here on the podcast. So one of the things that you talk about is, okay, so maybe you have an idea, but you need to do proper discovery to validate your idea, product market fit. So what do you mean by proper discovery?
Yes. So one of the most common mistakes that I see founders make is they start building too fast because they can, right? Because AI, because it's so easy to develop, they can use no code, whatever it is. If it's software, right? If it's hardware or something else, it might slow things down. But for software, it's so easy to go fast and maybe break things and be okay with it. But most of the time, they're building the wrong thing for the wrong audience. And discovery allows you to slow down a little bit and really understand what's happening. And when I say that, I mean, who is the person who actually has the problem? Oftentimes founders are the person who has the initial problem, right? I have this problem. I bet you there are other people who have this problem too. Or they go talk to other friends who are the most biased group of people ever and say, do you like this idea? I was thinking I could do this thing. And everyone says, yeah, that's such a good idea.
That's great. I would totally buy that.
Right, totally. So they have this false positive where they think, like, all my friends like this, or a bunch of people said they'd buy it if I built it. And then they start doing it and they don't understand why nobody's adopting their product or people don't like it. And then they get obsessed over things like UX or design things that probably have nothing to do with why people aren't using it. It's because they didn't do proper discovery work. So anybody who's taken my course and now will hopefully after they've read the book knows I'm a big fan for go slow and do as many manual types of discovery activities than you can do before building the actual thing. So I'll give you a couple examples. One of the stories I talk about in the book is the company Bridge, which was former students of mine, where they had originally started with an idea which they called Found, which was to help people who lose items get their items back. So items of value. So, expensive headphones or your, AirPods or something like that, where if you left them on a train or you left them in the sidewalk, on a bench, someone would find them and they would have a QR code on them and return them to you. And this is when QR codes were not yet in vogue. Like not everybody was QR coding everything. They had a technical co-founder. There's two of them. One was technical. He was ready to start building the whole solution for consumers to start filing their items and have people return them. And hadn't done a bit of discovery to really understand how the person who found the item would react to finding it and what would motivate them to actually return an item. And then on the person who lost something, how valuable does a thing have to be to actually want to log it in the system and all that hadn't really been figured out yet. So my encouragement to them was go put a bunch of items in random places all over campus or wherever and just see what happens. And I kind of gave them more of the push to do something manual. I would give them credit for they came up with that idea in terms of like, let's go just put a bunch of random items places. And they learned so much. They learned, who were the people who were motivated to return something and who, and also they learned what types of items people actually felt were worth contacting the owner for, right? A lost Swell bottle, nobody cared. But lost headphones, people cared, or a laptop or something like that, people actually cared. So they took a little bit of a risk putting random items out there to see what would happen and learned a lot, not only about those things, but also how do I get the thing back to the person? Do I want to leave it at a lost and found, or do I actually want to meet the person who lost the thing or the finder? You get the idea. So by going through all of that, they not only had a better sense of what the market of losing things was and how people behaved, human behavior being a big part of this, but also they themselves learned what they wanted to do. And what they realized through discovery was, oh my gosh, we're going to be in an insurance business. Like, we don't really want to be in an insurance business. And so that's part of the reason why I think discovery is important, not just for, are you building the right thing for the right people, but also, is this the thing I want to do? And is this something I'm excited about? And is there a there? Right? And what they learned for that business and why they changed it from Found to Bridge is brands cared a lot about who had their items. And again, early days for QR codes. And as they started to talk to brands about putting the QR codes on the items themselves instead of stickers, they found out there was a bigger there, which is how do you market and stay connected to your customer through QR codes. And so they pivoted completely to that type of business. That is all to say, not only did they get a better sense of the type of problem to solve for whom, but they found a business they were excited about, and how they built their business was radically different than what they would have built if they had gone the other route. Who they hired, how they did marketing, how they raised capital, everything else was completely different because they chose a different path to go down instead of where they started. So it's a long story, but it helps you understand, and I get into more detail about what they did in the book, about why discovery is so important, because it's going to help you identify a lot of things about this business before going too far.
Right. And I think you might talk about this in the book too. It's like, well, wouldn't that slow down raising capital? Shouldn't they have just raised capital and figure it out afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
But sounds backwards to me of raising capital for the idea that it's actually, there's pivots that happen, of course, but if you listen to the VentureFizz podcast, the majority of the time of the more successful founders I talk to, they did a ton of discovery.
Hell yeah.
Whether it was Vidya Health, the founder floor, and going door to door to dentistries to understand how they were, just like what these founders do, that with the ones that have scaled, you're just like, wow, that was a tremendous amount of legwork. Yeah,
that's right. Airbnb is another great example of that. The amount of rolling up their sleeves and handcrafting things before getting into building something. Building it is easy. There's so many tools available to you to build something. And again, even for physical products, there's so much available to you to do it. What's hard is figuring out what is the real thing people find valuable? And how will they change their behavior to adopt your thing? And that takes the slow time to do that. But then the hockey stick is there. And the money, if you're raising capital, if you need to, and I'm not one of those people who advocates one must raise, if you feel you need to, you've got a really great business that you want to scale rapidly, or it's very capitally intensive and you need to, then great, raise. But really be clear about what you're doing before you get on that treadmill.
Yeah. I mean, if you can delay the raise as long as possible, it's really going to work out for you in the end. Point in case, Klaviyo. Like they waited a really long time before they raised, and it really worked out in the end. But, if you can leverage your customers to pay the bills, why not?
Why not? Absolutely.
Okay. What about finding a co-founder? What's your thoughts on that as far as like, do you need a co-founder all the time? Like Y Combinator, it seems like they actually prefer someone to have a co-founder. It's not every single company that goes through Y Combinator, but it's definitely seems to be what they prefer.
Yeah. So I have very strong feels about co-founders. First and foremost, your co-founder is your partner, probably a partner you spend more time in your waking hours with than an actual partner in your personal life if you have one. And so never underestimate that. It's not just the technical complement or the business complement to you if you need to fill out those skills. So I think it's great to have, if you are somebody who needs a collaborator, a conspirator, somebody who's a shoulder to cry on or empathetic to what's happening in the business. They're your confidant, probably the only person in your business that you can tell everything to, right? Not your employees, not your investors. But it's not for everybody. And some people work better by themselves, or some people have a great set of advisors around them and augment what they need that they might have had from a co-founder with those people. So I'm not one who says thou must. I do know, or the evidence shows the investors prefer it because it de-risks the business. Then they know if something were to happen to you or you decided it wasn't for you, that at least somebody else is running with the business. But I am seeing more and more investors who are saying if you can demonstrate traction and you can get a great business off and running without one, you might not need one. And if you could have a great, number two, or you can have a great set of deputies that work for you that can be just as good as having a co-founder.
Yeah. All right. So we did talk a little bit about hiring, and you write about it in the book.
Yeah.
And there's a couple things that really, I guess, kind of hit home with me. You referenced the founders of Drift, and one of their first hires, I mean, it was early, like first 10 or whatever that number was. They brought in Keith Pescosolido because talent was so important to them, and they wanted to build a diverse workforce too. So they were so focused on bringing in the best people that one of their first hires was a really, really good, exceptional recruiter, which I don't see a lot of companies doing that. My biggest pet peeve is when I engage with a customer through VentureFizz and they just pawn it off to the office manager. Not that there's anything wrong with the office manager. They're really exceptional people. It's more of that's not what they were hired to do, and that's not their skill set.
Right.
So I'm just like, mind is blown where I'm like, that's your person who's going to engage with the people that are going to be the foundation of your company for success.
Right.
So in the book, you talk about the importance of hiring. You talk about, having a good website, a good process. Like founders, I don't think take that under enough consideration to really bring in the best people. They just think it's naturally going to happen. And you kind of outlined almost like a framework.
Yeah.
You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to, and it's a lot, but you need to do it because if you're not doing these things, you're not going to attract the best people.
That's right. So people at the end of the day are your company, right? And your culture, especially in the early days, I like to say within the first 10 people, you set your culture. That's what your company is going to be. And unwinding that could be really hard past the 10-person mark. Finding them is your job all the time. They say always be selling, always be hiring, right? Even if you don't have a position open right now, my rule of thumb is if you're going to hire somebody within the next 6 months and you meet that right person now, be okay with the fact that they're not exactly what you need right now, but when are you going to find them again? Or when are they going to be available again to be in your business, right? And do they have all the things that are additive, not just fit, but additive to your business? Whether that's a particular skill, background, experience, maybe they've been at startups before, so they can bring a little of that like depth of understanding. This is normal startup. When I was at DigitalOcean, that was something, I think I mentioned this in the book too. The first month or so I was there, a lot of really brilliant people who had never been at startups before kept asking me, is this normal? Like, is this normal startup stuff? Or is this, just DigitalOcean crazy? There were a lot of fun things that were happening in DigitalOcean at the time, but most of it was just normal. Yeah, this is what we do. We change priorities a lot. We have to be very resilient as things shift and pivot in the organization and we were in the cloud industry. So what was going on in the cloud industry at the time? And normalizing that can be a great thing to look for when you're hiring people. So it's not just, I like to say, it's not just a hammer to hit the nail. In the beginning, that might be a contractor. That might be somebody's like, I just need someone to code this thing, or I just need someone to get our, social media set up or whatever it is. But people who are going to actually build the fabric and DNA of your business and then carry things forward when things get bigger. And, as Dave and Elias did at Drift of, we don't want to just be the five of us forever. We're going to be a bigger organization with a great culture. Let's make sure we start to seed that from the beginning and be very, very intentional about it.
And it worked. They had a great talent, great culture. I mean, anytime we engage with them, they were always leaning in. Yes, let's do that because it's going to help, get more people aware of Drift. It was it's just smart. And so Jay Batson and Dries Beitar have been on the podcast separately as, talking about the Acquia story. And they both referenced from the very early days, they talked about the culture and the values of the company. And they actually have a picture from like literally early meetings of what do we want our culture to be like. And it's still like, it's still held like for, duration of time.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's so important.
It really matters. And I can say from all three of the startups that I was an operator in, even when the founders left, when I was at VMware, we had three different CEOs while I was there. And the culture that Diane built from day one, our founding CEO, was still there, I think, up until very recently when they just had their last final hurrah with Broadcom. But we really felt it worldwide. The VMware culture was very much from the foundation that they had set at the beginning when they started hiring people early on.
Okay, so not everyone wants to be a founder.
Yes.
There's joiners.
Yes.
So what's the difference, and how do you know maybe where you fit in?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that question because I'm a joiner, and I've been a 3-time joiner. So I think it's important for joiners to find their own way through startups and understand the impact that they make, and for founders to appreciate and understand the difference, right? And somebody who's not going to be in your brain, who eats, sleeps, and breathes the business like you do. So I have a section of the book called Love My Baby, which is founders struggle with this. They don't care about it as much as I do. And they're not eat, sleeping, and breathing. They're not waking up thinking about my business all the time like I am. How do I know they're as committed? So part of going back to the hiring point is finding people who can really be juiced about your business. I was definitely one of those people at all my companies where I felt like it was as much, it was definitely their companies, but I still felt committed to sort of that passion around let's make something super successful. But knowing that you're not always going to have that full span of control and decision-making on what's happening in the business, and trying to figure out as a joiner, do I have a say here, or is this all on the founders? So there's that piece of it. And then the other side of that is the founders often don't understand how powerful they are at their companies, even if it's a 5-person startup, that when they even just roll their eyes on a Zoom call, that somebody who's a joiner could feel like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. And actually, no, they're just thinking about something. They may have just looked at a text that has nothing to do with what you just said in the meeting. And then being told, so-and-so who works for you is really nervous that you're going to fire them because you rolled your eyes in the meeting. And the founder will say, what are you talking about? Like, what did I do? Like, they don't even get it. So part of the adjustment for founders with joiners is you probably have people who love your company and want to work hard and want to be passionate about your business like you are, but they may not be as passionate because it's not their baby. Right. So just understand and appreciate that they're giving you still 150%, but it's never quite going to be at your level. Right. I don't know a single founder who's ever satisfied with the product that's being built ever. So accept that. That's just the way it's going to be. But also understand how powerful you are and how your opinions are valued purely because you wear the founder. And also if you're the CEO or CTO hat, it carries a lot more weight than joiners realize. All that being said, again, unless you're going to fully automate your business with AI or other things that are out there and be a solo founder with no employees, you are going to have joiners. And so you have to understand, how do you make them feel part of the business? How do they feel that sense of accountability and ownership, even though they're not founders? Does that answer
Right.
that
Now,
question?
it did. It did. So being a founder is hard. And I think it makes it even harder when you're kind of looking around and there's all these reports of this AI company is at $100 million ARR in like 18 months or 12 months. And like you just see these companies and you're just like, that just puts pressure. Like, how am I going to like be successful when I see these other companies? And again, you're not building the same business as those. It's different metrics and go to market and whatever, but you still see these things and you kind of wonder like, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah. Founders really struggle with this constant, I have to be better, I have to hit all the milestones, especially if they raise capital, right? They feel a lot of accountability and responsibility to their investors that may go beyond what they had imagined or hoped to do. So there's this feeling of pressure to perform and keep all their employees happy. And a lot of them feel, going back to the hiring and joiners piece, of, I don't want to let anybody down. I convinced them to join my startup. I promised them their equity would be worth something someday. There's some big outcome. They're all getting paid terrible, startup salaries, and hopefully it'll be worth it. And I'll be able to true them all up at some point in time. They carry a lot with them, which is one of the reasons I love coaching, is to be there for them as their person. Even if they have co-founders, they still need somebody sometimes to talk about their co-founders, but they need that person who understands and who's empathetic about that pressure in making decisions. A lot of founders struggle with firing people. That's one of the classic ones of, they were so loyal, or they're a real, culture carrier for our business, and everyone loves them, but they're not delivering, or the business outgrew them. They were great when we were 5 people, but now we're a 10 million ARR business and we have 20 people, and they just aren't firing on the cylinders they were when we were smaller, or they're not enjoying it. They're not getting joy out of the business. And they put off, which is always a hard conversation, letting somebody go. Whether it's because the business outgrew them or because they're not performing, or both, that it weighs them down. And so it's something I see often. The other thing I see often is, again, that investor who's pushing them to go in a direction they don't want to go in, but they feel that sense of responsibility, or that this is my boss, they could fire me if I don't execute the way they want me to. How do I push back, or how do I stick to my guns on what I really believe I should do for my business? The other thing that I see a lot with founders and that stress and that pressure is they're, as I mentioned before, eat, sleep, and breathing their businesses. The founders are super committed to their startups, are not making time in their lives for joy and outside of the company. So whether that's time with friends and family, whether that's personal pursuits, things they want to enjoy outside of business, they almost feel guilty giving themselves personal joy. And that, in the end, is not healthy, and they won't be great leaders and founders when they don't give themselves that time.
Yeah, no, that's real. That's very true.
Mm.
All right. I'm going to step outside the book now. You split time between Boston and New York. So what do you see as the differences between the two startup ecosystems?
Yeah. Well, aside from the fact that I can eat any type of food I possibly desire at any time of day in New York, which is just not true in Boston. It's a dangerous thing, but it's a great thing. I think there's a lot of similarities, and then there's differences. Certainly, this is a bigger ecosystem, right? In New York, when I say in New York, it's a bigger ecosystem. There's more startups, and it's very diverse. I think there used to be a time, probably before I moved here, which was in 2019 when I was full-time here, where it was mostly fintech type businesses. And now we're seeing everything, right? Digital health, CPG, like name it, it's all here. And the community is extremely engaged and vibrant. So there's not a single week that goes by in New York where I don't have like 3 or 4 events happening that I'm trying to juggle and figure out what I can be to, and what I can go to, or what I have to say no to. Boston, I think, has a lot of vibrancy too, and has a lot of interesting activities that are going. It's just, there's just fewer people. So there's a lot of it is just density. I think that makes it a big difference. On the flip side, and I am a Bostonian. I grew up in Massachusetts. I went to school in Massachusetts. The access to the educational research and community is just not as rich. There's certainly great things happening here in New York. We have the fabulous Cornell Tech over on Roosevelt Island that we just hung out with Founder Collective, who's a Boston-based business, did a great event here in New York. Cornell Tech's great, and NYU and what have you. But in terms of vibrancy of entrepreneurship, I think there's a lot of great things happening between HBS and Sloan and other universities in the Boston area that just allows them to connect and do events together in a way that I think we don't see as much here in New York. But they're both great. I mean, and the nice thing is because the cities are so close to each other, so many of the entrepreneurs that I work with spend time between both or are jumping between both. So I think that's a nice thing about the proximity of the two cities. It's an easy acceleride. People can go back and forth. All our investors here, almost all of them spend a lot of time, and the ones that I work with spend a lot of time in Boston and see the fruit of what's happening in Boston. Certainly on the healthcare side, biotech, pharma, those things is really hot in Boston.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot going on in two main industries from what I've been paying attention to with and I'm talking about Boston. So yeah, definitely you've got the legacy of the biotech, but there's such a crossover now with the data and AI with the healthcare. And
Right.
so that's a big convergence. And then two is hard tech. Like there's so many hard tech companies that are building like nuclear reactors and things like that, where I'm just like, what are they building? I don't understand what this funding announcement just said, but I'm sure it's for the greater good. So,
For sure. Robotics is a big one for sure.
Yep.
A few companies that I've worked with that have come out of my classroom or at least the two I know out of my classroom. I don't think it would have been possible in any other city to do the things that they're doing. I think the city's primed for that. There's so much expertise in Boston around robotics, hard tech, where hard tech meets biotech and pharma, I think is really strong in Boston as well. So I think we'll always see that. I think it's just the foundation, as well as the platform and infrastructure, which is my roots, right? I mean, Akamai was founded out of MIT. Certainly, we have a number of big old tech companies, legacy tech companies that came from Boston, and I think that's part of the DNA of Boston and the Cambridge area.
Well, Julia, thanks so much for taking the time. It was great to catch up with you. And again, this is the book. This is the new handbook for all startups. After the idea, it's just, like I said, it's a joy to read because it just speaks a very simple language and it's something that you can follow through on. It's not a lot of hypotheticals or something you just read and you're like, I'm not sure what they mean by that, a lot of theories or something like that. It's very practical.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I can't wait for everybody to read it.
So get out there and buy your copy.
Thanks for having